It is the 29th of September 2021, and this is question time. So we're going to run for about 30 to 40 minutes, and we're going to have a couple of sections. So before we get started, though, you're going to be peppering us with a ton of questions. Those of you that are long-time listeners will know this. Those of you that are just joining us for the first time, I'm looking out to all of you. I want to know what's going to win the day. What do you think is more important? Is it information or knowledge? So just have a think about that for a moment. I'll give you a couple of seconds, stick your finger on the screen, yell it out if you're with someone else, and just what do you think is more important, information or knowledge? All right, so the answer is knowledge. Now, I don't want to sound rude, but there is a wrong answer. This isn't preschool anymore. Those of you that picked information are wrong. The right answer is knowledge. Now, why do I say it's knowledge? Well, information in itself is just organized data about something. Knowledge is an understanding through experience and education. So, knowledge is actually being able to digest, understand that information, primarily through experience and education as well, so that you can actually, understand what it means and apply that in the real world. So, we talk about that all the time. Just because you read something about, for example, house prices are going up, well, you need to be able to understand what that means and why they're going up, how they're going, where are they going, and apply that to your personal circumstances. Because that could be very different and could mean very different things for different people. If you're a first home buyer, that's probably not good news because you're looking to try and get into the market and you're preferring house prices to be stable while you're buying. In a perfect world, you'd love them to drop 30%, you buy, and then they go up 50% the next day. So really, really important that you understand that distinction. So today's session is all about drilling into information and then turning it into knowledge. So, it's a famous saying, I'm sure you've all heard this, if you feed him, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, you teach him how to fish, then he'll be able to feed himself for the rest of his life. So this is very much the same concept that, I can just tell you this information, but what we're hoping to do today and why we do this, why we've been doing this session for so long, is to teach you that concept, effectively teach you how to fish so that you can understand how to break down all that information that's getting thrown at you from all the different sources out there and turn that into knowledge so you know what you should be doing with that information, and ideally taking those actions, doing those steps, setting yourself up, whatever it is that means to you, so you make sure you maximize your position, whether it to be buy, sell, hold, rent, whatever it is out there. So that's why it's so important. And just remember that, we're all about setting you up so that you've got the tools, the system, and the process to be able to do this yourself. So as I said, we're going to run for 30 to 40 minutes. The first section will be what we call the information section. We'll go for about 7 to 10 minutes. I'm going to run through everything that's happened over the last 7 days, pepper you with a ton of information, just like in the real world. Then we're going to put that aside. We're going to move into the question or the knowledge portion, and that will go for 20 to 30 minutes, depending on how many questions you've got. And really, we'll be focusing around those issues and topics that I brought up in the information section. But of course, we'll be guided by whatever questions you do. So, you can relax for about 10 minutes. If you've got questions ready to go, drop them in the Q&A to get to the front of the queue. And then we're going to be all at it, going at 100 miles an hour. This is for you guys. So really participate, get involved, put your questions in there, be active, focused, turn your phone off, put it down, whatever it is, and really just give us your dedicated time for the next 30 odd minutes. And I guarantee you that you'll finish up today's session with a ton of value and actually, be further forward in that plan as to how you should be moving forward to get the best for you in today's circumstances and into the future. So, as Warren Buffett says, again on this concept, risk comes from not knowing what you're doing. So again, having that information and not actually being able to turn it into knowledge. So just remember that. You want to be like him, you want to be successful, you want to have that great understanding. So it's very much about that concept, and that is hopefully what you're going to leave today with, or at least be very much understanding the framework, and you may need to attend a few more sessions. All right, so let's get stuck into section 1. What have we seen happening around the countryside over the last 7 days? A lot's been going on. Perhaps the biggest thing is finally Melbourne's back. We started having inspections. Auctions are starting to go again. So that's really, really good news. With auctions going again, you know, you've got to be prepared yourself. So I think Greg's got some great advice for everyone there. Of course, as I said, Melbourne being back, we expect to start seeing the market that was effectively in hibernation for about the last 6 to 8 weeks start to burst back into it. It's behind the starting gun, obviously, for this spring selling season. Listings, again, are low, but they're slowly starting to come back on. So it'll be interesting to see what the guys think is going to happen throughout to the end of this calendar year. Mortgage stress, obviously, as prices go up, do you get more worried about that? You know, where does that sit? And what can you do to be making sure you're not in that position? And surprise, surprise, apparently people lie on their mortgage applications. Wouldn't believe it. I mean, you know, who doesn't add a little bit of spice to whatever they're talking about? But we'll run through the impact of that and what that might mean for you. Okay, so auction results, as I said, really, really strong result. Again, the first weekend where we actually were able to have at least a week's worth of private inspections here in Melbourne. So we obviously saw, you know, whilst the number in terms of having only 343 auctions in Melbourne is still low, really, really good clearance result again at 77%, which meant the national number was back up into the 80s. So that's one of the strongest national results we've seen in the last 6 months, albeit not as big a volume as we were seeing earlier in on the year. But I think as we can expect that this spring things will start rolling again. And particularly, you know, if you think that traditionally, you know, a sales campaign would have 4 weeks lead up. So pretty much imagine those auction numbers to really, really peak in the next 3 to 4 weeks as those campaigns have had their full time to run through. But, you know, those of you that were perhaps worried and thought I didn't know what I was talking about when we were seeing, you know, the 50% clearance rates and were a little bit concerned, I told you that it was not an issue to be worried about. And this is really showing that it was very much a factor of the point that we were locked out in this state from being actually able to go and inspect properties. As soon as that opened up again, despite what you may read in the mainstream media, people are not prepared to buy sight unseen, as well as vendors are saying, well, I'm not going to get the best outcome. And hence everyone was just prepared to wait. And now we're seeing that come through. Looking forward-looking statements here. So these are obviously prepared by realestate.com, and they measure what they see as the likely buyer intent and forward-looking demand. So, you know, whilst we had, you know, backwards-looking facts and figures in the auction results, this is very much what we should anticipate to see moving forward over the next 30, 60, 90, you know, days and so forth in terms of what activity they're seeing on the website. So here nationally on the buying index, you can obviously see, again, it continued to have a strong rise up here. That was very much led, of course, by the Melbourne Victoria story. As I just talked through, you know, people just weren't wasting their time window shopping, looking for listings because there wasn't a lot of listings out there. And if they couldn't actually go and physically see the property or transact on it, they'll wait until they can. So hence why we're seeing that sharp rise there in Melbourne. And as you can see, the national number's gone up again. So I think this is pretty much indicating we're going to have a very solid next sort of 3 odd months. We will be weird to see how it happens on Christmas. I think Greg's talked about it before that, you know, we're probably not going to have the same long shutdown over the Christmas, January holidays as we used to, as everyone's playing catch up. But that'll be interesting to see how that pans out over the next couple of months, how much sales actually get in and where all the vendors are sitting and looking and thinking about what they should be doing. So if we move through, this is the same index as far as it goes for rents. You know, same sort of concept, but this one is perhaps not as informative as the buying index. And the reason I say that, whilst it is still very important, and I do think we should look at it, just remember that the barrier to buying a property is significant compared to renting a property. So, you know, people happily rent a property sight unseen. And, you know, it's anywhere from, you know, a 6 to 12 month commitment, which, you know, is not a big commitment in the scheme of life in general. Whereas buying a property, by the time you pay all the transaction costs, stamp duty, the stress and moving and taking on a mortgage is not something you typically do, you know, once or twice a year. On average, I think people tend to hold their homes for circa 10 years. So, you know, that's why it's a little bit more indicative on the buying index, whereas renting continues to go through. and we're still seeing surprisingly strong numbers, as I've mentioned, all year. This was the average of 2019, this line here, and we've always been above that. Those of you that have delved in behind these statistics, turned that into knowledge, will know that that's perhaps, you've got to have a good understanding of that, because the total size of the market in terms of potential renters is significantly smaller during this whole of 2020 and 2021 because of the closed borders. We don't have the immigration coming through. We don't have the students. We're still seeing a ton of activity happening as people are moving and finding they can get better deals. But really, in terms of that actually building the demand so we can see strong rental growth, I think that's probably not going to occur until well into next calendar year as the borders open up, vaccine rates get through. But definitely, it's well positioned. And I think those of you that do have an investment property, whilst your rents might be down, you'll know if you've met the market, it has still been a relatively good position to be able to get it rented through there. So that was the national figures. Local figures here in Melbourne very much followed the same trend. Again, seeing a bit more of an uptick, not quite the same as sales for that very same reason as I said to you, that people were still prepared to rent a property based on photos and a virtual tour because it wasn't such a big commitment. Here as well, I know with our guys, often we would do that. And then the people could come, and if they came and there was some major issue that hadn't been disclosed to them, then we're more than happy to let them out of the contract. So I think that's why you're seeing this generally in the market being very different to what we've seen on the sales, where it's all of a sudden, as soon as you can expect, the demand's gone through the roof. Okay, pack that away in your mind. Think about everything I've said. Start hitting the questions, because we're about to move into section 2, the question section, the knowledge, where it's all over to you guys to hammer us with the questions. Before we do, those of you that missed the start, my name is James Maitland. I'm the General Manager here at Salvo. I've helped create more than 11,500 homes for people just like you on the line over the last 20 years. This is what I do. This is what I love. And so I really, really hope that I can help you in whatever way it is, on your journey. So as far as Salvo goes, what do we do? It was really hard to sum up, because we've got a ton of different businesses in here. But ultimately, we're all about helping you create a home. So whether that be helping you with the finance for a home, building a new home, finding a home, managing an investment property for you, might even be at the start of your journey where you're looking to rent a property for the first time. Anywhere that you are on that journey and that ladder, we can help you across there. It's all about helping you create that home, whatever it is for you. And we'd love to be involved with you if that makes sense. So I will, at the end of today's session, let you know if you do think that this is potentially the right fit for you, how we can move forward on that journey and potentially try and help you fast track where you are. On the panel today, I've got Greg Arbeck, Jack Jan, and Lucas Karras. These guys have been doing it for, between us, we've been doing it for almost over 100 years. Ton of wealth and knowledge and experience here. So these guys are excited. They can't wait to get all of your questions. I've seen a heap of them coming through already, so I'm excited to get into it. All right, that is it. Let's clear the deck. Those of you that don't know how to use Zoom, you must have been under a rock. Either put it in the Q&A or raise your hand and we will go through with you that way. So I'm going to ask my first question to give myself an opportunity to read through some of your questions. We were talking about the restrictions here in Melbourne, and I mentioned how they've finally eased up over the last week, albeit we're still under very, very strict instructions, no work, no nothing. But as far as real estate goes, we've actually been allowed out to go and do private inspections. What are we expecting to occur from this? Is it going to be a sharp sort of snapback or a gradual, snapping back? Where are we seeing these drivers, and what should we expect in terms of demand, supply, prices, and so forth?
I think what we've noticed, James, is that if we look at what happened last year, we're probably going to see a surge in pricing on housing again. And I think Jack's got some other stuff he's going to go into in terms of that, but that is primarily driven by buyer demand versus the number of listings that have come onto the market. And at this particular stage, we still would appear that we've got higher demand from potential purchases than the listings. So if we look at what that does, it's supply and demand, that should increase property prices, and things will, I think in the next 2 to 3 months, we'll see some pretty big figures happening again.
Okay, so, I guess it's like what I was sort of saying at the start. Campaigns are happening again. People are out there. I mean, what are you seeing, Greg, from obviously being unable to be on the ground doing inspections? What are you getting, 10, 20 a Saturday that you've got groups of people wanting to come through and look at your listings?
Well, last week, I think we had 14.
Well, there you go. So much so that I think you need to go and get a quick, a small touch up on your heart just to get you back in fighting condition again.
It was insane, and it was either take more drugs or get a heart fix, and I've decided to get a long-term fix instead of the drug fix.
Good. Well, we wish you the best, and all of you out there, give Paul Gregg a break. He's got to go and get himself back into match fitness. But I know the guys are inundated in terms of there's only so many hours in the day, and these private inspections obviously have to be one-on-one and take a ton more time. But there is plenty of people out there on the streets if you're ever wondering in terms of that activity coming back. So definitely, I think we're going to see that go. So, in terms of spring selling season, 29th of September, knowing my months, there's only 30 days in September, which means tomorrow is the last day of this month, which means we're 1/3 of spring down, and Melbourne hasn't even really got out of the gate. So, where are we sitting in terms of, this spring selling season? Is that it? It's done for us here in Melbourne? Is it going to go longer? Has someone actually got the facts and figures and data on listings and what we can expect, or where we're tracking compared to long-term averages?
James, 100%. The spring selling season is coming up. There's a lot more fresh listing will come out on the market. So we've already seen the new listing will increase in the recent weeks. And nationally, I think we've seen all the capital city has the big lifting in number of the new listing. And even in Melbourne, we've seen the largest increase all over the all capital city. So since the beginning of the September, which we just early the spring coming up, and we've seen in Melbourne, we have the new listing jumped, increased 48.5%. Is comparing with the end of the mid end of the August when we had a lockdown. But we've noticed that when those new listing coming up, which is actually before we have announced we'll be allowed to back to the one-on-one inspection. So now we be allowed to have the one-on-one inspection. We're expecting there will be the further push on the new listing on the market.
So in terms of, the time that it takes, like if you're going to list a property today, you've usually got sort of 3-4 weeks before that property is actually ready to start having inspections. By the time you get it photographed, staged, cleaned, set up, everything ready to go, loaded up on all the portals. So would it be fair to say that, the demand can bounce back really quickly because people just pick up the phone and say, I want to inspect. But in terms of you getting listings on there's a bit of a lag. So we're probably unlikely to see the listings outpace the demand for, well into next year.
No, we might not see that. Even we've seen the huge number of the listing add-on to the market, but the total number of the acting listing stock we have currently will still below the 5 years average. Obviously, this because most of the capital city nationwide has a lockdown, and in Melbourne, like one of the biggest market of the country, we're not able to do the one-on-one inspection, which is different with Sydney. So the Sydney will very stable because even the New South Wales has a lockdown, they still be allowed to do the inspection. Melbourne, we just back onto the inspection. And as we said, as the real estate selling, we need 4 to 6 weeks to prepare. But the demand is such strong now, and I don't think we will be able to have a balance between the supply and the demand. This moment, I'm still thinking is the seller's market.
Okay. So I saw a question from Nancy. I was just trying to pull it up there again, just talking about auctions. But let's say it's a seller's market then. You're out there. I know a lot of people on the line today are first home buyers or people looking to move to that next home. We've got increasing demand. We've got less supply, or less than the last 5-year average we would expect for this time of the year. So if people are looking to go to auction, you've got to be match fit, because it's quick, it's fast. It's on Zoom at the moment as well. I think we should be sometime next month be able to do on-site auctions in limited numbers. What has anyone got any advice they can give? And I think, Nancy, correct me in the Q&A if I've missed your question, but what Nancy asked, and I think a lot of people on the line would be wondering, any sort of simple advice or rules that people can follow as to how best to navigate through this auction so they can buy their property without causing themselves a heart attack. No pun intended, Greg.
I know. So I was just looking at that. I think the first thing is don't drown in data. Like you were saying, people look at all this data and it's just all too consuming. Unless you have the knowledge to understand that data doesn't mean anything, because so if you're looking to buy a house, just don't get too hung up on the data, because a lot of the things like median prices, clearance rates, things like that, and unless the data is actually reported accurately, which sometimes is not 100% accurate, don't get too hung up on that. So the first thing I say is don't drown yourself in data, don't get too confused, just take a deep breath. So that's the first one, you don't get drowned in data. Ask the right questions. So a lot of people will go to a place there and they won't ask the right probing questions. The questions you should be asking the agent is things like, what type of buyers are looking at this property? Not how many buyers. Things like, what type? Are they first homeowners? Are they empty nesters? Are they investors? All those people have different criteria and different budgets. So if the agent is being honest with you and he gives you this sort of information, you can turn that into knowledge, because a first homeowner and an empty nester and investor will have a different budget. So you can look at, that gives you like the sort of guidelines. It also then, how many people have actually taken a contract, which normally everybody does. Ask them how many people have actually taken a contract and asked for changes, because those are probably more serious than most people just take a contract and stuff like that. A very key thing, is this house ready for me? Don't get FOMO, Lucas's favorite thing. Don't just go in there and get panicky and say, and fear of missing out. Make sure that this property is what you want. So don't get FOMO. Then prepare your price. Okay, so when you say prepare your price, you go through different scenarios. You go to yourself, okay, would I be happy if it goes under the price that I'm prepared to pay? So you go, well, I'll be over the moon if that's the one scenario. You then go, what is a fair price? And you go, okay, well, that is probably what the fair price is. And then you get the third thing, you say, what am I prepared to stretch to, but without putting yourself, as you talked about mortgage stress, without stressing yourself out. And the only way you can get that is look at the thing and understand the knowledge. We talked about that, is it only comes from knowledge, understanding those things. So you can get someone to help you that understands those sort of things. But key things, know what price you're prepared to pay, know what price and how far you're prepared to go. The other one is, again, consider the competition. And sometimes they were saying, when you actually at an auction, you can actually look at people's body language and understand whether the person you're bidding against is actually reaching their sort of budget, or they've gone past their budget, especially when they start talking to the missus or the partner. And then it's like, biting the fingernails, and you can start thinking, okay, those people read the signs. If you're at that auction and you're looking and you're seeing the person you're bidding against is actually talking to their partner, you can probably be pretty sure that they have reached their budget, or they're stretching themselves, and you know how far to push.
So, Greg, are you condoning people going and playing poker at the casino or with their friends to hone their skills of
absolutely
being able not to show their emotions?
In a scenario like this, when you're spending, we're talking median price $1 million. Okay, so you're betting on something big. You need to know this. You can have a look at the auction, see if a person's real, look at their body language. And then on Zoom auctions that are happening a lot, these days, some people forget to put the mute on. so they'll be like, hey, they'll be talking to their partner and say, I think we've gone over up there. And then you know, so these are little things, little tricks. Is look at body language on a Zoom auction, have a look at that. And the final thing is, if the property is going to get passed in, make sure it gets passed into you. Make sure you're the final bidder. In Queensland, that doesn't apply, but who cares about Queensland? We're talking about Melbourne here at the moment. Make sure that if the property gets passed in, it gets passed into you. So then you've got first chance of being able to negotiate the deal that you hopefully get the property. You know, some people go, oh, it's going to pass in and then I'll get an offer in afterwards. That's not the case, because whoever had the highest bid at the last time, it gets passed on to them. So those are the 5 things that I suggest you prepare yourself to go to an auction. If you do your homework like me, I try and prepare 10 hours before, which is insane, but be prepared and you will actually have, you know, you'll probably have you'll get what you want or not what you want because the property is not right.
Yeah. All right. Great advice there, Greg. I think particularly that one about, you know, if it's still within your price range and the auction or the auctioneer hasn't announced that the property is on the market, make sure you are that last bidder. I brought my current home in exactly the same manner and locked it in for a price that I was wrapped with. You know, it was below what I thought was a fair price. And I do know the agent told me after that there was another buyer who was prepared to pay more. But I was able to get in first, lock that away. So really, really good advice there. And, you know, I think anyone who is out there, you need to be active, you need to be aggressive, and you need to focus, but you need to have a foundation so that you don't do something that you're going to regret. And I think Greg's given you a really, really good framework to work with there. So let's just change gear for a moment. Let's just, you know, work through. I've seen a few questions coming through from people in terms, you know, how do I know where prices are going to go? You know, Greg mentioned about setting what you think is a price you'd be over the moon to get it for, where you think fair value and your stretch price is. Sometimes that can be hard, particularly in a market that it is, you know, been pretty much for most of this year, albeit for not this last lockdown period, where it's very hard to guess, you know, how much demand that there is out there and how much people are prepared to push their prices. You know, we're constantly seeing records getting smashed, reserves always going well over where they sit. So, you know, how can we look at it from another way in terms of, you know, whether you think you're overpaying for the property or you've got fair value? Let's look at it from the point of view, what can you actually afford? So, you know, we mentioned at the start about mortgage stress and so forth. There's an actual strict definition of what mortgage stress means?
It is actually. That's when you have to pay more than 30% of your pre-tax income.
Okay.
For repayments, on repayments.
Right. Okay. So that's, you know, you're earning $100,000. If your mortgage payments are more than $30,000 a year, then you're in what they define as mortgage stress.
Correct.
Okay. So how does that work out in terms of median prices? You know, can you give us an example so people on the line can actually get a feel where they might sit?
Sure. I'll actually give you 2 examples for a single person and for a couple as well. So let's assume a single person in Sydney wants to buy a property. The median price is $1.4 million. So if you got, and your average income is $92,000 per annum. So take into consideration, you have to pay 20% deposit. You would need another $105,000 income per year to avoid the stress based on a single income.
So that's a pretty big pay rise.
More than double than the average salary. Now, let's look a little bit closer to home in Melbourne, and let's do an example with a couple this time. So the median house price here is about $1 million. So a couple that are purchasing $1 million property, they need to have a combined income of more than $140,000.
Okay, so you know that's perhaps again highlighting. I mean, that was interesting. You gave us Sydney and Melbourne. Again, I guess highlighting those different median prices can make it more affordable, because I think that's perhaps not out of people's reach. You know, as a couple, perhaps if you're looking at buying by yourself, it still could be hard at that median price. So, you know, what are some some guidance you can give people or tips, you know, whether they might believe they're already in mortgage stress, or perhaps they're budding first home buyers and want to make sure they don't end up in this position. You know, what advice have you got for people as to how they can try and manage themselves out of that position or make sure they don't end up there in the first place?
Well, first of all, don't overstretch yourself by taking a bigger loan, no matter how amazing the house might appear. Ensure that you have a buffer of about 1 to 2% so that you're ready and prepared for when the interest rates increase, if they increase, whatever time that will happen. Most important, I think the number one that I even tell my clients is work your way up. If you can't afford a house that you want right now, it's important to get into the market. So buy an apartment and eventually make some money on that and use that to get into the dream home that you want. Another one is become a rent investor, which we talked a couple of weeks ago, James, if you recall. So that is where you rent in the place you want to live and buy an investment property somewhere else that you can currently afford based on your income. The other one is have an offset account, because that reduces the interest that you pay on the loan. Another good, which is similar to this, is have a split loan. So you can have a variable rate and a fixed rate. And this means with the offset account, you can save on interest, but you can also make extra repayments on the variable rate loan. Another one is to cut back on expenses and debts. For an example, gym memberships, streaming services, you know, just have a look at where your money is going and try to cut down on a few things that you can live without. Now, another thing is most of the banks, most of the lenders provide a mortgage calculator. So get on that and use it. Now, don't always, a lot of people make the mistake, they use a mortgage calculator, great, I can afford it, they're a young couple, but don't just look at the calculator, always think of things that are happening. So for an example, a great one is if you're planning to start a family immediately. So if you're gonna have a baby, there's gonna be additional costs. And expenses. So try to sort of, you know, be prepared and think where you are, what stage of your life you are now and where you're heading. Another good idea is now that the interest rates are so low, pay down as much as possible that you can on your mortgage. Finally, shop around for the best mortgage rates you can find. Currently, there's quite a few lenders with mortgage rate that are below 2%. So shop around to get the best rate for you. So that's it.
Great. And I mean, I think it's important to have that balance. As Lucas said, don't overstretch yourself. But remember what he said is you've got to be involved. You've got to get into the market. So don't say, look, I can't afford it, I'm just going to wait. You've got to look at those different options. We've been talking a lot. I think there's been a lot of questions over the last month or so about compromise and what are the things you can compromise on, what are the things that you can't. So, you know, as Lucas said, he gave you some options, whether that be rent vesting, whether that be, you know, using this first purchase as a stepping stone. You know, you don't have to buy your dream forever home as your first home. You know, make sure that you balance out, that you don't put yourself in a position where, you know, you can't afford it and you're under mortgage stress and pressure. But also on the flip side, don't just sit on the sideline. You've got to get involved. So find that happy balance somewhere in between and employ those strategies. All right, before I wrap up, I mentioned at the top of this session that surprise, surprise, a latest survey found that people have made some form of lies on their most recent mortgage applications. You know, Jack, where's that sitting? You know, what are the results of that of those findings, and how does that compare to you know, 6 or 7 years ago, back in 2014, that led to that big inquiry into all the banks about the liar loans? Where are we sitting at the moment?
Surprise, surprise, is more than 2 in 5 home buyers lie on the mortgage application, according to the UBS report. And we find there are 41% of the home loan that not completely factually accurate currently, and which is well above, I think, is the 2015, back that time, which is 27%. Now is 41%. We're above the, we line, the mortgage, the fake statements.
Okay. So, just looking at that in isolation, people should be worried that there's going to be some kind of regulatory change. I mean, we all know what happened back in 2015 and 16 and the massive inquiry that came about from that. So should people be worried, or do you think we're in a different environment now that we're better placed to handle it? What's the advice to everyone as to what they should expect to occur from this? And how do the banks figure out what they do, or APRA, or whoever it is?
To be honest, I don't know, because the regulator, the government, you never know that. But I'm pretty sure the government.
Surprise, surprise! You actually can't predict what a government's going to do.
But the things I can make sure is because this time we got a different situation or the reason than the 7 years ago. Because this time we're saying that more and more people, they are the owner occupier, compared with the 7 years ago, which is more the investor coming into the market, and then the government, the regulator is trying to tighten the standard lending standard or other regulation or rules. But I don't think people need to panic or worry about the things because, currently the RBA already confirmed the low interest rate will still continue. And also the most important is all the major banks, the lenders, they have several different methods to make sure the client, the customer, they will be able to make the repayment, which means the bank is not, the bank are also doing some assessment for the customer just to make sure you're not overstretched, you're not on the mortgage, Lucas, mortgage stress. So in that case, I don't think it will be the people need to worry about. But in terms of if any new regulation or the change from the government for the regulator, we don't know yet. We say probably by end of this year or in a couple of months, if any change is coming up.
Okay. So it'd be fair to say though that, perhaps the banks have learnt from the experience of 2014, 15, 16, and are probably already maybe even factoring in that not everyone is going to be 100% truthful in these applications. So they've probably already got that kind of buffer. Is that sort of where you think it's sitting?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, hopefully, Don, Chris, I saw you asking some questions there. Hopefully that's answered that for you there with Jack. It is 3:10, so just conscious of time. Let's wrap up that section there because I do want to just give you a few closing comments before I let you get back to the rest of your day. So, I laid out the framework at the start. I told you about information versus knowledge. I gave you the information section. We've gone through the knowledge, and hopefully we've helped you understand that framework as to how to delve into that information, work out what it means, and then effectively try to get a framework for how you apply that to your own personal circumstance. So what are you going to do from here? Well, as much as it pains me to say this, I know 90% of you are going to go and you're going to do nothing. You're not going to make any changes. You're going to continue about your day as if nothing had happened, and you're not going to make any changes, which for some of you, that's fine. And this might not be for you, but what I do want to say, those of you that have been at this for a while and you're wanting to see some changes, you haven't been hitting those goals you want, just remember, if you don't make any changes, don't expect to get a different result. So what I really implore that 90% of you there, at least half of you, I really, really hope that you think about what we've gone through today, think about the framework we've discussed, and you go out there and try and make those changes and apply that yourself. If you need to know more, then join us again. We do this every week. And for those of you that really want to move forward and you want to fast track it, then what I'd love to do is actually have you join us and let us help you. So, I said that's one of the easiest ways to move forward quickly is to find someone that's got that experience, got that knowledge that can help you and set you up to move forward faster. So, who's this going to suit? Well, look, it's not for everyone. Unfortunately, not everyone is going to be a good fit for us. What you need to be able to do is be prepared to actually take actions, do the hard work, roll up your sleeves, understand this concept, as I said, of knowledge, and be able to learn that and get it through so that you're able to see these signs, go out there and apply it yourself. I'm not proposing that you need us to hold your hand. We just want to help give you a framework, and on some of those areas throughout your journey, hopefully we can help you further on those. And ultimately, you've got to actually prepare to go out and take those actions and do what you do the steps that are necessary. So if that sounds like you, then I'd love to be able to talk to you further. So how's the best way we can do this? Well, the most active way that I think we can help you, while still being, careful to understand your time commitments, and you may be a little bit hesitant about this, is all I'm asking you for is a small commitment of 15 to 20 minutes of your time sometime in the next 5 days. So you don't have to come and see us. I mean, I don't think you're allowed to anyway. We do this over Zoom, FaceTime, a phone call, whatever it is. And if you just give us 15 to 20 minutes of your time, I guarantee that that's the smallest possible commitment that you can make and still expect to have a realistic outcome of actually getting some value from it. So what are we going to do? Just have a quick chat to you, very informal. There's no process. There's nothing to do. You don't need to fill out any forms. It's just a quick chat to find out where you are. What are you struggling at? What are you trying to achieve? Where you are on that journey, and then really identify as to how we might be able to help you, and put in place a few sort of potential next steps. And if you'd like to go further, then great. If not, well, then hopefully we've helped give you more of a framework so that you can go out there and do that yourself. So if that sounds like you, and you want to do that, then it's really, really easy how you do it. It's 3 ways. You can jump in the chat if you're with us live on Zoom now, and there's a link to do that. You should have been redirected on your web browser to the booking link. So that's another way you can do it. Lastly, for those of you that have joined us on Zoom, if you're not sure, don't have your diary with you, I will send you an email with that link so that you can book that anytime over the next week. But they do book out fast. It is dedicated time just for those. So, there'll always be that space there. But if you want to get your preferred time, jump on now and book one of those. I guarantee that you will get value. As I said, it's the smallest commitment you can possibly make and still expect to get value out of it. So jump on, as I said, book one of those. They do go fast. I guarantee you'll get value. So I want to just tell you about an experience that I had before I let you guys go. So, this was back in July earlier this year, just before this prolonged lockdown 5 and 6 started. I went away in the school holidays with my family for a short trip. I think we went for 4 nights to Hamilton Island. Great place of the world. We had a fantastic time. Really, really good. The only bad part of the trip was landing here in Melbourne and finding out we went into lockdown the very next day. And everyone wished, particularly my girls, said, "Dad, it's Zoom school anyway. We could have stayed up in Queensland." But I can't change that. But what I want to tell you about is an experience that I had when I was up there. So I think it was on the second day, and my eldest daughter said to me, "Dad, I would love to go and climb up to the top of that mountain up there and watch the sunrise in the morning." And I thought that'd be great. What a good experience for us to do together. I said, "No worries, Bella, let's do that. Looking forward to it." So later that night, before we went to bed, jumped on my phone, looked up what time does the sun rise. And I hadn't really thought about it, but it was 4:45. So really, really early. And, one of the joys about being on holiday is being able to sleep in. So I was just about to say to her, "You know what, Bella, can we just do it another time? I don't really want to get up early." But I thought, no, she's excited, set my alarm, and away it went. What felt like no more than 15 minutes later, this thing, as you know how annoying that alarm is. So what did I do? I said, "Go away," and I hit the snooze button. And it was that easy. I rolled over and I went back to sleep. 8 or 9 minutes later, went off again. And I hit the snooze button. I thought, I'm not doing this. I want to sleep. And then about 30 seconds later, I thought to myself, what am I doing? Just get up. How excited is she? How disappointed will she be if you don't? So I made a conscious decision then to get up and take that action. I woke her up. We ran to the top of the mountain. We saw the sunrise. You can see this photo. You can see the joy on her face. It was a fantastic experience and something that both of us will never forget. But the reason for me telling you this is you all know how easy it is to hit snooze, to hit no, and just keep sleeping. But if you actually want to get those results, you want to get those memories and have that joy like I did, you've got to be prepared to get out of your comfort zone, get out of bed, take those actions and move forward. So, be like me, take that action, book one of these sessions, move forward, because if you don't make a change, you're going to continue to get the same results. So, don't keep hitting the snooze button. be one of the people that achieves their goals, moves forward, or definitely moves forward faster. If that sounds like you, as I said, jump on and book one of those sessions. So that is it for today. It's been a great session. Hopefully you've got a ton of value out of this. I know we shared a lot. I went through a lot. It is fast and it is quick, but we do this every week. So if you did miss out on getting your questions answered, I will try and go through the transcript after and come back to you if we didn't get in through. Otherwise, feel free to join us again next week. We do this every single Wednesday at 2:30, rain, hail or shine. So from me and all of the guys on the panel, thank you very much for joining us today. And I look forward to seeing all of you sometime soon in the future.